And so today I work for the New York City Department of Health. I want to take a quick moment just to thank the Queens Public Library. While some libraries across the countries are now regressing and banning books, I want to thank the Queens Public Library for elevating and uplifting marginalized communities.
Yay, library! Hi everyone, my name's Ananya. I use she, her pronouns. I wear a lot of hats. I think I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to things. I'm a creative writer, I'm an artist, and my professional work is in education. So I run youth programs for high school students and middle school students here in New York City. What else can I share about myself? I'm also...
Could you just speak into the mic?
Yeah, is this better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, great. I'm also an oral historian, and I'm currently working on a project documenting stories of queer and trans South Asian folks and their chosen families, and working on an art project connected to that. I'm happy to share more, but that's a little bit about me.
Hello everybody, good evening. My name is Rohan Jolie. My English pronouns are they, them. I also respond to Eye, Sha, and Ta. I am a dancer, writer, public speaker. I am also the founder of the organization, the Galatian March. We are a Black Asian solidarity initiative. We build community through one, education on parallel experiences with colonial state violence, as well as two, mutual celebration, starting in 2020. And since then, we've literally been mobilized around the country. Thank you.
I'm Pauline Park, feminine pronouns. I am found at Pauline Park on Twitter, Facebook, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. I'm not on Instagram. I guess that's for young people. Facebook is for old farts like me. I have two autobiographical essays on paulinepark.com if you want to read my whole story, which would take a very long time to tell. I'm chair of NIAGA, the New York Association for Gender Rights Advocacy, and I'm really delighted to be here. Thanks to Susie and everyone else for organizing this wonderful event.
Hi, my name is Ryan. I use they, them pronouns, and I could read my bio, but I don't want to, because I want to bring something into the space that I would otherwise not be able to, which is that I actually grew up in Flushing, and being at this library, which I somewhat grew up in, is very impactful for me to be this visible in this space. And so I want to bring that in this space. But, you know, I've been organizing for over a decade now in queer and trans Asian spaces specifically. And I'm happy to share more information about that when we get to that conversation. Hopefully we'll get to it.
All right, thank you for all your intros. There's so many terms being thrown out today, such as pansexual, demisexual, etc. I don't even know what the new terms are now. How do you identify under the LGBTQ plus umbrella?
Yeah, I'm a lesbian, I'm a woman, but I also really love the word dyke and the history and community that comes with that word. I'm cool with the word gay, I'm cool with the word queer, yeah.
Volume. I only use my own terms because I have found myself kind of struggling with belonging in the queer community. So at this point, I really only use the term Firebird to explain all of me. Yeah.
Since this is coming out day, I'll mention I actually had two coming outs. I had my gay coming out when I was just turning 18, and then 18 years later, when I was 36, I had my gender transition, and so I now identify as a transgender woman.
Yeah. I would bring into the space today the fact that in terms of sexuality, I identify as demisexual, first and foremost. And then I also, in terms of gender, identify as a transgender man. Sometimes I don't feel comfortable saying man. And then I also identify as non-binary.
So there's a lot of terms that I like. If I had to only choose one, I would say I'm a queer woman. But under that umbrella, I also identify as lesbian. And sometimes, in a blue moon, there's a hot man. I'm like, okay, I'm bisexual. But I would say queer.
All right. Since it's National Coming Out Day tomorrow, could you share a little bit about your coming out process? Was there someone you specifically came out to in the beginning?
This is always a hard question to answer because I feel like for a lot of queer folks, especially queer folks of color, we always have to navigate institutionalized racisms where we are invisibilized simply because we're of color. We also have to always navigate most of us are home cultures, and those home cultures that speak specifically to or are rooted in transphobia, homophobia, or queerphobia. For example, my family's from Jamaica, and thanks to England and the policies they enacted and the trauma they instituted, for a fact is there in our Constitution that England gave us. Homosexuality is punishable by up to, I believe, 10 years in prison. Heavy fines, massive labor. So like I have to navigate that all the time. So I feel like for me, this queer journey is really rooted in understanding the ancestry that came before colonization. So for me, it's really looking to the people who may not have names, but the stories of, for example, I of the Han Dynasty, I am part Chinese. And so reading on a literal Chinese emperor who was very bisexual, which it's grounded me in saying that, you know, my queerness is something that is beyond where we are, thanks to colonization.
Yeah, I love the story of Han ID. That's where they get the expression Kasi. So my story is very long and complicated, so I'll give you the really short version. I mean, I knew I was trans from the earliest age, I'd say at least at the age of 4. And then puberty hit, and then I discovered this attraction to people who were also sexed male at birth. And back then, while it was not easy to come out as gay, there was no one in my high school who was openly anything. That was not a thing, not even gay, much less trans. When I went away to college, I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison. My first time away from my Christian fundamentalist family, I came out as gay. There was a very small gay community. It wasn't an LGBT community. There were no trans people, openly trans people. And then it was a long process until I finally decided to transition, and that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline, for sharing. You know, history is so important in terms of contextualizing how we respond to coming out. And for me, like when I came out, I'm just going to go into the trans part because it is very complicated to answer in my experience of how to talk about what the experience of coming out as trans is. And I would say that I found that, like for me, my history was, you know, I was underrepresented as an Asian person in the you know, LGBTQ community already, and then navigating, trying to own my gender expansiveness was also something that was very scary. And so I think one story that I think about in terms of being able to come into my own actually was somebody who was out in my university who was bisexual, and she was the one who I first talked to about potentially being trans, and she was very affirming and also with encouraging me to go to the Gay Straight Alliance. And so that was kind of my experience in terms of doing that. And the only other point I would share in terms of historical context, I think, you know, I was not as brave as I am now today, and it was because of the few trans masked Asian folks that came before me that I had the courage to go on my gender journey.
So my coming out story is a good one. I entered kindergarten when I was 5, and all the little girls were saying, "Oh, Mario's so cute." And I was thinking, hey, how come none of the other girls are saying Angela's really cute? And so at the age of 5, I realized that there's like social cues that I picked up on. And when I was at my age, I was really into MTV. And I had to go to this dictionary, and I had this gigantic dictionary at home. And I opened it up to the dictionary to see what the word homosexual meant. And I remember I was 8 years old, and the word said something like someone who's attracted to the same sex. And at the age of 8, I was like, oh, that's me. And so at that age, I already knew from MTV that that word was not really a good word, or at least they didn't speak of it in such fun ways. So at the age of 8, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna tell anybody, and I'm gonna wait until I'm 18. That's like a whole lifetime away. And then I'll tell somebody. So that was really basically me putting myself in the closet. And I have to say, when I was 18, I made that promise to myself, to my 8-year-old self, that I'll come out when I'm 18. So when I was 18, I told my best friend, and my best friend, she was the MVP of softball, basketball, and volleyball. I'm like, clearly she's gay. I'm gonna tell her. And when I told her, she was not very supportive at all. And I think what I realized from that experience was, you know what? I came out to myself when I was 8 years old. I accepted that I'm queer or gay at that age. I don't need to tell my best friend who I thought was gay, or anybody. I don't need anyone's acceptance. And I think that's really what I learned for myself.
Thank you all for sharing. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, coming out. I feel like I like to think about it more as coming into myself. And yeah, growing up, I was really, I think, alienated from all of the parts of my identities. Like, I felt really alienated from being a girl and girlness, and I felt really alienated from being an Indian kid and like my culture, whatever that was supposed to mean. And then, yeah, I had no sense of bisexuality as a young person. And I think it was really when all of those parts of me were able to come together that I was able to fully like understand myself, like in my womanness, in my South Asianness, and in my like lesbianism. And it was through this experience in 2018, when I was doing a lot more performance and poetry. I was part of this show in Seattle, where I'm from, called Yoni Ki Baat, which is like a South Asian version of the Vagina Monologues. And that show in Seattle, historically, had been a really like cis, straight Indian woman space. And the year that I did that show, the director, Uma Rao, who's now my auntie, she's a queer woman, and she was like, I want to do something different this year. I want to have an all queer trans cast. And that experience was the first time that I not only met peers, because I met some peers who were also queer and South Asian in college, but it was the first time that I got to meet folks older than me, folks younger than me, and like able to hear everybody's experiences with dating or with whatever in their life, and I was actually able to see a future for myself. And I think it was only in being able to like witness my future through other people, through elders, not even elders, just folks like who were older than me, who had experienced some of the things that I had yet to experience in life. Like I remember someone telling me that they had been with their partner for like 10 years. And I couldn't even like picture that, like what that could mean or look like. And so I think, yeah, it was this one moment. We had like retreat for that show, and we were all sitting in a hot tub, and everyone was just like sharing their stories of being in therapy and their relationships. And I was like, wow, I'm gonna be okay. Like life is gonna happen, and I'm gonna get to be who I want to be. So maybe that's not my coming out story, but that's definitely coming into myself story.
All right, awesome. A lot of people talk about being estranged from their family and having chosen family. Are you still in touch with your family, and do they accept you as you are?
Yeah, that's another long story. My mother died in 1984, which was 40 years ago, and my father died in 1973, which was 51 years ago. So they've been gone for a long time. And there's kind of a very long story about my mother and her sort of coming to terms with my sexuality. This was during my gay phase, and I feel that in some ways, even though it was extremely difficult for her, given her belief system, she realized that she had to accept me for who I was, at least who I was at that point in time, if she wanted to continue to have a relationship with me. And so in many ways, I think it was her last task, really, on this earth. And we had a contentious relationship during my adolescence. We argued about politics and religion and sex and all that kind of stuff. She was, conservative Republican. She loved Ronald Reagan. I remember when he invaded Grenada, and my mother called me up and said, "We're in Grenada." I said, "What? We invaded Spain? What's?" We had this very contentious relationship for a long while, and then I came back. I was living in England for 2 years. Came back, and we had this really rather remarkable encounter where she didn't really use any words like gay or homosexuality or anything like that, but she let me know that she understood that the man that I'd been living with was my boyfriend or partner, or whatever term you want to use, in my second year in London. And a few days later, a day later, I went back down to Chicago. I was living in Chicago. She was in Milwaukee. And then the next day, she went to the hospital and died 5 days later. So it was the last real conversation that we had.
I have a similar, this was not originally what I was going to say, but Pauline's story inspired me to change what I want to share, which is first, depending on how much time I can get through the story, is that my father passed like a couple of months after I had very officially told him my pronouns, and it's a very fraught situation because we ended up, I actually ended up working in the same department as he was, in the same office, and because of other reasons and activism actually, they actually started training all of the staff to LGBT sensitivity training. And because we have the same last name, we were in the same session. And I did not tell him ever explicitly to his face that I was trans or what pronouns to use. So I was terrified in that room, and after asked the trainer, "May I be excused?" So that happened, and then he got trained, not by me because he was trained officially in Taiwan as a teacher, a disciplinarian. I cannot talk to him about anything. I cannot educate him on anything. So I was glad that that happened, but then he shortly died. So no resolution there. So that was tough. But I would say that my family has eventually generally came around. They date a long time, and I am happily recently, before this event, kind of playing with my nephews, so yeah.
This question is really important just because for a lot of Asian folks, our families mean so much to us, right? And their acceptance means the world to us. For me, in my family, I think there's a generational divide, obviously, right? There's like my siblings who are younger, we grew up in California, we grew up in San Francisco, of all places, right? So they're very queer friendly, they're very open to that. I have a nephew and niece, they're the next generation, and it's not even like an issue. But with my mom and the older generation, I think a lot of it is just lack of understanding, or lack of knowledge, or lack of exposure. And I really respect, my mom asked me one time, she said, "Karen, why do you choose to be something that the government, the military, and the church reject? Why would you want to choose that life for you?" And that's a really thoughtful question, because even though she doesn't understand a lot about the queer community or our lives, I think she was trying to understand. I would say that my relationship with her, she accepts it. I think perhaps she tolerates it. She's not the biggest ally. You'll never see her marching for queer rights at the San Francisco Gay Pride Parade. But I do think that she has accepted it, and she knows that that's who I am. And because it's still like an ongoing process. It's been like more than 2 decades that she knows that I'm out. And I think that I take every opportunity as an opportunity to really educate and like show her a different perspective or show her a different world. But yeah, I do still speak, my aunts and uncles here in New York, they know because I appeared in the Singdao, which is the Chinese newspaper. For 2 years in a row, I was featured in Singdao Daily News for Gay Pride. So that's how they know. That's a good way to come out to your family. They don't really like to talk about it. But once again, I think it's a generational divide. My cousins, they're really cool about it. But then my uncles and aunts, they just kind of don't want to talk about it.
This is a complicated question for me because no, I'm not in contact with my blood family, but that's actually a really joyful thing for me. And I think that when we talk about estrangement, that piece is often missing. But like I said, growing up, I felt really alienated from myself and from my community, and the people that were supposed to be my family never really felt that way for me. And instead, now as an adult, getting to choose my own family has been so incredible. And like I truly have like a deep, wide, extended family of like little babies in my life who I see once a week, and I'm a really active part of their lives, to like peers, siblings, cousins, to like aunties, uncles, to like elders, like people like that I would kind of consider like grandparents. And these are all people who are not related to me by blood, but we have this very, like, very, very much a family relationship with one another and a family commitment to one another in the same way that, you know, you might expect someone to show up for you if you were having like a medical crisis or something like that. Like, these people are there for me. And yeah, I think like when we talk about estrangement, there's a lot of grief, and I think all of that is really important, but there's something so much more beautiful on the other side of that that I think it's really important to talk about. And yeah, I'm never going to tell someone not to be in a relationship with somebody if they want to be, but also, like, you never have to be in a relationship, like a familiar relationship with somebody who you don't feel good about. And it can be because of your queerness, but it can also be because of any other reason too. And the reason that I'm estranged from my family isn't because of my queerness. And yeah, and I'm really, really happy about that.
Oh, I love that. It's just, I personally I don't feel comfortable commenting on my relationship with my family. Other than that, my cousin is here. So what I will say is that I am in deep admiration of a lot of the elders and the community members who are unlearning queerphobia and transphobia, because these are constructs instituted by colonization. I mean, aside from just the example I spoke on in Jamaica, there's, you know, folks like in the Philippines where we have the Babaylan people who were our community leaders, our conflict resolution people, and these folks were known to be what we understand as trans. And these were the first people that the Spanish targeted during their whole colonial strategy and conquest. I'm also thinking about, you know, the Hijra and other genders in South Asia, or our Pacifica siblings, where there are multiple genders, dozens of genders, including identities like Fa'afafine. So I definitely just would just add further, I'm just in deep admiration of the elders who are working on unlearning that almost like collective trauma, the collective curse of colonization, and the homophobia that results from it.
All right, so I know all of you are involved in various groups. How did you get involved in queer activism, and which groups are you a part of right now?
So I first started being part of GSA, like I had mentioned earlier in my life story, in 2004. But you know, I went to school, I went to college away from New York, and so when I came out as trans, it was very hard to move back into my family. So it was through, eventually, when I did move back, it was through Q-Wave, who was marching in the in like the Pride Parade or something, and you know, racially targeted me and gave me a flyer, come to this event, and that's how I got involved in the queer trans Asian Pacific Islander community in New York, and we went from there. So you know, I was part of QA for a while, and then I was part of Gipimni for a while, and technically, I don't know, no comment. But I was, you know, I organized with Gipimni for quite a while, and you know, Q-Wave, both Q-Wave and Gipimni saw that I was very responsive to community organizing. And so they wanted to see how I could bring my transness into the space, and how that could be maybe equitable for me, and very much with this question for a decade now. and so what has happened now is that I've launched, it's very nascent, but a Transcend Asian Pride New York City collective that, because some of the members have moved away from New York, and I'm also partly in New York and partly in Philly, that we'll have to rethink our organizing strategy, but yeah, that's kind of what we're up to.
1 second. What does Q-Wave and GPIMNI stand for?
Well, GPIMNI started out as Gay Asian and Pacific Islander Men of New York, but when I was on the steering committee in 99 and 2000, I proposed that we include trans people. And so now, even though GPIMNI is completely inclusive of all genders and gender identities, but the acronym is so well known, they still use the acronym GPIMNI as an identifier, as a legacy name.
And then also same thing with Q-Wave. When it first became an organization, I think it stood for Queer Women, Asian, Visible, Empowered. But to be more inclusive, then we dropped the W part and just go by Q-Wave. To answer your question, I grew up in San Francisco, which I think is very pivotal for who I am as an individual, right? Asians run San Francisco. No kidding. And then also, San Francisco is the gay mecca of the world. So when you get these two communities, being queer and Asian in San Francisco, it's not that rare, right? So imagine growing up in that kind of environment. I think that really instilled a level of confidence or a level of comfort in my own skin, being the majority. And so I realized that not everybody has that experience. If you didn't grow up in San Francisco, then you probably didn't have that experience that I did. And so for me, my driving force in organizing and queer organizing is how can I create this space, like a safe space? How can I create this community where people feel like they belong, they are home in that environment? Because I grew up in that environment, and it's so important for me to create, through my organizations that I'm part of, to create that safe space for people. So today I'm part of two organizations. I'm on the steering committee of Q-Wave, which is a grassroots organization for queer women, trans folks, and gender non-conforming people of Asian descent. And I'm also on a steering committee of Lunar New Year for All, which is a queer Asian contingent that marches in the annual Manhattan Chinatown Lunar New Year parade.
I love Q-Wave. Shout out to Q-Wave. Yeah, my approach has always been community building, and I think that was really rooted in like a real hunger for community as a younger person coming into myself as a queer person. And so as a college student, that meant being a part of the Queer People of Color Alliance, which is what it was called at my school. And that was really pivotal in finding myself both representation outside of queerness as like a white construct, but also actual community and people who, some of them are now still part of my chosen family. And also, I think as an artist, I've always looked for community in people who are interested in art making. And so, as a younger queer person, it looked like me hosting poetry workshops and folks attending those and building community that way. And being really an active part of, when I lived in Seattle, the Seattle poetry scene, performance spaces there. I think now it's really looking like me being an active person and working in youth spaces. So I both work for a nonprofit organization called Octavia Project, where I run free programs for middle and high school students, but also in my personal life. It's really important to me to center young people, and so that looks like hanging out with my chosen family kiddos, like I said. Have been working with a group of folks who ran a childcare collective from 2008 to 2020 to kind of bring that back as part of movement work and social justice work. And yeah, continuing to create with people. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, Octavia, like Octavia Butler. Okay, come on, Seattle. My modern day organizing, I definitely have to pay tribute to where I've come from. So first and foremost, I gotta give a shout out to this collective I came across in college called the Asian Northwestern University Project. And it was a space where through dialogue, through understanding anti-Asian violence on campus during that time period, I finally was able to claim the term Asian American, because I felt for the longest time I did not have access to that term because of my blackness, because of the color of my skin, because of my cultural disconnect from my roots, which I have discovered over time as it so happens. But I also would say I want to give a shout out to all the Chicago queer Asian collectives I was a part of when I was there. I lived there for 9 years. And so I gotta give a shout out to all the Filipino queer collectives like Malaya, Anak Bayan, shout out to Tricon, a South Asian queer collective, as well as Eye to Eye, Invisible to Invincible. And all of that, the lessons I learned from those collectives, the lessons of showing up for each other no matter what, definitely was a route that inspired Blasian March. And we have, since 2020, been just mobilizing specifically to create community for Black, Asian, and Blasian communities. We also work with collectives like South Plains Women's March, Caribbean Equality Project, Malaya, Anak Bayan, their chapters here, Barkada NYC, which is a Filipino queer collective, also QA Think Epimony, so yeah.
So I actually started to get involved with activism in 1994, so I guess it's been 30 years. I'll try to summarize that in a few minutes. Lots of organizations. It started really, I was actually living in Chicago, and I came to New York because Gipimni had a Stonewall 25, during the Stonewall 25 celebration in 1994, had a conference, the Rice Conference, and I met 3 queer APIs from Chicago, and they were very dissatisfied with the organization in Chicago, which was an Asians and Friends organization.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just still around.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll
give backstory.
Yeah, we can talk about that. But I said, so why not start an organization? So we decided to start the first queer API run organization in Chicago, which we called GAPIC, Gay Asians and Pacific Islanders of Chicago. That was later succeeded by Eye to Eye, Invisible to Invincible. And then I moved to New York, got involved with Gipimni, but also co-founded Queens Pride House in '97, and Iban Queer Koreans of New York, which was the first queer Korean organization in New York, and actually really the only one. The Dari Project was important, but that was a discrete project centered around the publication of a book of stories. And then Niagara, the New York Association for Gender Rights Advocacy in '98, and led the campaign for the transgender rights law that was enacted in 2002. And also co-founded Out POCPAC, Out People of Color Political Action Club, which is the first political club vying for queer people of color here in New York. And a few other organizations. I'll just mention one more, which was in 2011, co-founded New York City Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. Because of the LGBT community center's ban on discussion of Israel-Palestine, and then ended up going on the first US LGBTQ delegation tour of Palestine in January 2012, and have been doing Palestine solidarity work ever since. There's a whole bunch of other stuff I could talk about, but I'll leave it at that. You can, go to pointpark.com to read about my activism.
Oh, you guys are all so busy. I don't know when you sleep. Okay.
We don't.
Okay, all right. Obviously, gay marriage was legalized in 2015. Have things gotten better for the queer community? And specifically for the AAPI community over time?
Okay, this is an excellent question. Whoever came up with this, good question. To answer the first part of the question, I would say that, when I was growing up, same-sex marriage was not even an option. So the rights that you gain from that, such as visiting your partner in the hospital or inheriting their assets, that wasn't even an option. So as a kid and growing up, I was like, I'm a second-class citizen. I really felt that. So in 2015, when same-sex marriage became law in America, it really changed a lot of things. But not only that, but there's a whole movement too, right? It's about elevating, also increasing the visibility of queer folks in media. And they're not only just like ridiculed, but they're also a main character, or maybe they're just a part of the family. Now, I would say that, all these people are coming out, famous people, athletes, even some people, it's cool to appear queer. I'm looking at you, Harry Styles. Lack of knowledge and a lot of fear, so they didn't accept us. But I would say that in my experience here in New York City, in the 13th year, so it takes time, it's not just overnight. In the 13th year, I remember, that was last year, the announcers of the parade were so joyous to have us there, and they were repeating the same slogans the queer community would say, such as "love is love," and they welcomed our contingent and called us the gay and lesbian sisters and brothers. Let's welcome our gay and lesbian sisters and brothers. And I just felt, wow, that is an exuberant welcoming. And while it took so many years, in my experience, I think that it is getting a little bit better, but it has to have better representation. So.
Okay. Well, first off, I will definitely say I cannot speak on what the Pacific Islander experience is, since I am not Pacific Islander. I do wish there was Pacific Islanders here to speak on what is going on in their communities, but I can speak in solidarity. What is gay marriage to any of us when our communities are still being deeply impacted by systemic anti-Asian hate? I think about, because the model minority myth has certain assumptions about our experiences, we are neglected in so many other capacities. So from 2010 to 2014, the CDC reported across the country a 36% increase in HIV infections in AA, Asian American communities. We are the only community where we actually do see increases in HIV infection rates. So clearly our community is still being systemically oppressed in ways that we aren't really talking about. Even like the Asian Pacific Islander Ending the Epidemic Advisory of New York City, as a name, in 2020 released similar information, statistics, with particularly showcasing that a lot of the infection rates were being seen mostly in Jackson Heights. So marriage equality, I think, was wonderful, but I think it was not being seen in a network of other issues. Like, what does it mean for the queer Palestinians who are being erased and genocided right now? What does it mean for, any of us who have to deal with, lack of access to clean water or clean air, or the mega jails that are being built in Chinatown, or the Cop City being built here in Queens? What does that mean to our community as Asian Americans?
I supported and do support marriage equality because I don't think the state should be discriminating on the basis of sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. That being said, I don't think marriage should have or should ever define the LGBT community or movement, right? And I was doing a lot of state level work as well as local legislative work during the whole marriage equality movement era. And I saw how marriage in some ways diverted the resources of the community and the movement. And I also saw how some people in the community, by no means all, but some people felt like once the Supreme Court ruled in Windsor and then Obergefell, they felt like the work was done. But even though marriage equality was an important victory for the community, it did not address access to health care, including trans access to health care, police brutality in the criminal justice system, which routinely delivers criminal injustice to communities of color. It did not address immigration. It did not address, obviously, the question of the illegal occupation of Palestine. And so I think that we need to think about how queer API communities are nested not only in the LGBT community, the white dominant LGBT community, but also their API communities of origin, right? Because even though on one hand we have to challenge the model minority myth and we have to fight the constant ongoing narrative of the Asian as the eternal foreigner, at the same time, many of us do have connections with our countries of origin. And so what happens in those countries of origin does have an impact on people here and vice versa. And so we have to think about how we as queer APIs can broaden the vision of the LGBT community here in the US, which like most Americans are so insular, right? But there's a whole world out there. And so to the extent that we have involvement with countries in the Asia-Pacific region, we can expand the consciousness of Americans, particularly queer Americans, in thinking about what's going on beyond our shores, whether that be what's happening in terms of China, which I could talk a great deal about, or India, which is sliding into fascism under Narendra Modi, et cetera, And so I would also add that marriage has been an important organizing factor in countries such as Taiwan, now Thailand, which has enacted same-sex marriage. So I think marriage is still an important vector, although I'm always, when I think of marriage, I'm always reminded of Mae West's quip that marriage is an institution and I'm not ready for an institution.
So I'm kind of in similar camps with some of the latest speakers here. I would say that one of the things that, not every issue that's really making people's lives worse is identity-based here. And patriarchy is killing us, colonialism is killing us because we can't afford to live here. And we can't, as Rohan has mentioned, access to good and healthy resources is being destroyed as we speak. And we have an ecological disaster coming towards us, and we're just not looking up. So things are really bad in that sense. There's that, and then I also want to raise in terms of patriarchy, the spa shooting in Atlanta highlights, how much we're just literally dying from guns as well, and the violence and the anti-violence, the anti-Asian violence directed towards us is also escalating. So I don't feel safe being in this country much longer, And the more I am outspoken, I also feel like at some point I will have to leave. So that's honestly how I feel.
So looking ahead, what projects are you guys working on for the future?
Oh my goodness, I'm always working on so many projects. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I'm working on an oral history project right now that is really energizing. I'm interviewing queer and trans South Asian folks about chosen family, and so it's been really lovely to get to interview some of the people in my chosen family and then also people in the larger community. Because, yeah, chosen family, because it's not linked with blood, it's a little harder to keep track of. It's a little harder to put down in the history books. So it feels really important to me to do this project both because it's a way for folks to share their stories and for those stories to be shared with others who are looking for a blueprint on how to create their own chosen families. But also to say chosen family is also just as important as blood family. And like our family stories, our family recipes, like it's the same level of importance. And doing oral history has been a really incredible experience that has made me feel so humble in people's generosity in sharing their stories. And I think it just makes me realize how much all of us are carrying incredible stories, and we just have to ask each other if we want to learn them. So yeah, that's the oral history project, and then I'm working on a visual art component where I'm creating portraits of the narrators in the project and hoping to bring in some speculative elements to this. So asking folks, like, what do you think your 80th birthday will look like? Who do you want to be as an elder? Or like, what do you wish for your child self? And then bringing those into the portraits that I'm creating. Yeah, working on other projects too, but that's the one that has been really energizing me lately.
I love it. I love it. Oh, sorry, I got turned on. I love that. And yeah, I love everything. What am I working on? So many projects. I don't know how I'm standing. But for Blasian March, we are organizing several things. Next month, we are launching a photo exhibit at Pace University, connecting the work of Blasian March to the civil rights era through photography. Our opening reception will be on November 14th in the gallery itself. We are also mobilizing Blasian Pride as usual. Actually, tomorrow, National Coming Out Day, is Blasian March's birthday. We'll be turning 4? Yeah, 4. Wow, math. Oh gosh. I went to school, sure. So there's those celebrations coming up. We are also doing a fundraiser at UME Books, the bookstore in Chinatown, one of our partners for our book fair program, which is an event where we give away free books from Black, Asian, and Blasian writers to build solidarity. Books are all free. This program we actually just did in Orlando, which means we were protesting in Orlando via books by giving out banned books from Black and Asian writers, so DeSantis can eat it. That's a public record. Thanks, Queens Library. We are now in talks of bringing the book fair to the Bay Area, which I'm excited about. Myself, I am also a journalist on the side. I am working on a piece of Asians for Palestine. I'm working on a piece regarding the Hmong community and systemic racism in California, where a large portion of the Hmong don't have access to clean water, which means a lot during massive fires across the state, which has resulted in a lot of police violence towards the Hmong community. I'm also working on a choreography regarding the Chinese experience on Angel Island, where a lot of people were forcibly detained for up to a year or longer for fear that Chinese were bringing in diseases, which sound familiar. But Yeah, that's me.
So I'll mention just three things. First, I joined the Out FM Collective a year ago. OutFM.org produces shows on WBAI FM radio from 8 to 9 p.m. every Tuesday. And I've been doing a lot of shows. I've been doing shows on a whole bunch of topics, but I tend to focus either on queer APIs, or on Palestine, or on transgender, and sometimes in combination. Like this past Tuesday, I did a segment interviewing two queer Arabs, one Palestinian American and one Lebanese American, talking about what's going on in the Levant, the Gaza genocide and the war in Lebanon. Second, I joined a community-based drag story hour defense group. Because as you all know, Queens Public Library and New York Public Library have hosted Drag Story Hour for some time now. Kudos to Queens Public Library and New York Public Library for doing that. But they've been under attack by some right-wing transphobes who can only be described as fascists. And so to protect these events, as well as the performers or readers, we have come to various libraries to surround the libraries with love and protection. And I participated in 5 of these events, 3 at the Jackson Heights branch in my neighborhood, and 2 at the Elmhurst branch. And they were really eye-opening experiences. The biggest one, which was 2 years ago, come December, we had probably 250 or 300 people from the community, and this was queer, non-queer people who wanted to defend both Drag Story Hour and the library and freedom of speech against this bunch of bigots. And so that has been an important intervention. I don't know if these people are losing interest. I hope they are. But at the same time, we have to point out that there are over 500 bills pending in state legislatures that are anti-LGBT. Half of them are transgender specific, and most of those are aimed at denying trans youth access to health care and other types of interventions and support. So we have to talk about that. Then I'll just mention the third thing, which is my ongoing Palestine activism, which is, I think, more important than ever in the midst of the greatest genocide of the century to date, which our tax dollars are funding. In an Asian context, since this is kind of an Asian American event, I'll mention that when I started, I was often the only Asian face in the crowd. There were maybe 2 or 3 other APIs I knew who were involved in this work, but now I see lots of Asian faces, which is really, especially younger Asian Americans, which is really, really gratifying. And I think it just shows how broad-based this movement for justice in Palestine is. I'll also mention that it was really, when I marched in the Queer Liberation March, the Asians for Palestine group were marching, and one of them said, "Oh, let's take a picture with you," and complimented me and said, "You know, you were one of the first." Then last thing I'll mention, because I actually marched in the first Lunar New Year for All contingent back in February 2010. And while it's important as Asians to march in LGBT queer events, I think it's also really important for us to have a queer presence in Asian community events. And that felt really like we were making history. And I think having marched 3 or 4 times with the contingent, every year it feels more welcoming and accepting. And that is truly gratifying. So as I like to say, with regard to queer API history, it's not just that we're queer, we're here, get used to us. as Queer Nation famously have been queer. We have been here for over 3,000 years, and you were used to us, you just forgot.
We were erased, actually. Yeah, so what I've been up to, I've been busy trying to put down the roots for my new organization, Transcendent Asian Pride. We're somewhat still figuring out exactly how our programming is looking like, but thanks to NCAPIA, we have been able to organize the program's called Talking Spaces. It's 2024, about the 2024 election. Our next event is in Queens. It's October 20th, 1 to 3 p.m. at the All Saints Episcopal Church at Sunnyside. You can check it out. Check out an RSVP, please. If you do plan on attending, because we like to have enough snacks for people, and what else. We want to help activate people's voices, similarly to what Pauline's talking about. I know there's folks who have lots of feelings about voting this election, especially folks who are for Free Palestine, and I want to talk about it. And also, if you register to vote and what else, please let us know. We have these hot queer Asian stickers that I just recently designed with the QR code in the back to pledge to vote. Feel free to take. It's in the back. Thank you.
But sometimes it loses steam, and there's a number of years, many years actually, where it was kind of flatlining. There was nothing really happening. So for us to get to 20th year, it's a big celebration of not just us, but also all of our partners. Everyone that you see here at this panel, we have built so many community partnerships in New York City that has really gotten us to where we are today. So we are still planning that. I think as long as it's before June of next year, it's still our 20th birthday. So we're still planning that. So please check us out on Instagram at QWaveNYC for any updates about that.
Okay, this is the last question. As we mentioned before, tomorrow is National Coming Out Day. Do you guys have any resources or tips to share with people who are not out of the closet yet and are preparing to come out?
Oh. I would say one, it's completely okay if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel ready. Take your time. It's literally, you have a lifetime to do all the things you want to do. So when it feels safe and when it feels ready, a whole family is ready and waiting for you to choose them. I would say also, it is worth, especially for the queer Asian communities and other communities of color, I do think it's really worth fortifying your queerness and your ancestry, fortifying your experience in the stories that have survived the erasure of colonization. Yeah.
I really grew up going to the local public library, and I honestly think that libraries are one of the best possible ways of educating oneself. I remember going to my local branch public library. This was growing up in Milwaukee. And by the way, on the south side of Milwaukee, which is all white, my brother and I were the only non-white children in our grade school. And now I live in Jackson Heights, which is the most ethnically diverse neighborhood in the world. Here in the Borough of Dreams. I think, I remember I was going to the library and I was 12 years old, and I saw the LGBT shelf, which had about a dozen books. And this was this is a long time ago, early 70s. So one of the books was Society and the Healthy Homosexual. But there was another book entitled Transvestites and Transsexuals. And I remember opening it up and realizing that I had something to do with the people described in this book. This was long before the age of the internet. Obviously, there are many internet-based resources. I think listening to the stories of people such as on this panel, going to outfm.org and listening to the interviews with LGBT queer people, many of them activists. You can read my story on pawneepark.com. And getting involved with community work. Mahatma Gandhi famously said that one finds oneself through service to others.
Yeah, so, I mean, yes, there are internet resources now. There's community organizations like QWave, and like Queens, like the community centers in around the city are great resources as well. But also like, kind of like my story about coming out, you know, we can find our chosen family and like mutual aid support groups and groups like that that really really help us out of like these sticky emotional situations, including coming out, which is very fraught. And in the process, we find the courage to do what we need to do. And that may look like coming into ourselves instead of coming out, but I think both are very, very important actually, because in community work I find that we're both working externally and internally in our growth.
I actually have a number of tips for folks that are thinking of coming out. I want to echo something that Rohan was saying earlier. It really is a lifetime of coming out. It's not one act, it's not to one person. Actually, it is to one person. The most important person, I would say, is coming out to yourself and just accepting who you are. Because the world will throw a lot of things at you, but once you fortified your true identity, who you are, then it becomes a lot easier. And I think that sometimes a lot of people hide because they're afraid that maybe there's no one like me. And then that idea makes them feel even more isolated, right? But I promise you, you are not alone. And when seeking out, I think it's monumental, it's vital to find your community, whatever that is. Sometimes it might be hard, right? But I've learned through my decades of life that it takes a lot of effort to complain. When something, there's not this organization, there's a lack of this space for us, well, do something about that, create that space. And I promise you that like I said, you're not alone, and there are many people who share the same things as you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think what's really important to remember is that yes, queerness is an identity that you can have as an individual, but it's actually something that connects you to a very large community. Being queer is a community act. And like folks have said, it's part of a lineage. You've got ancestors, but you've also got living community. So find those people, reach out to people. If you're a young person, find a safe adult. I think libraries are a great place. There's so many movies, there's so many books. Hit me up for recommendations. Go watch Saving Face. But yeah, there are so many people waiting for you to give you a big hug. So yeah, I don't feel like I have much to add.
All right, that was it for my questions. I don't know if there's questions on Zoom or in the audience that anyone has. Does anyone have any questions?
If I give you $750 million now,
My Venmo is.
will you promote a church and you will be the preacher in the pulpit and telling people and convincing people, not convincing because you have to disseminate your principles to many people who would like to attend. I will attend. Right now you are trying to create a profit. Eventually you have to create a profit selling books and everything like that to finance what you are saying instead of expressing your sentiments, your experiences. Like you are not being accepted. You're accepted. You have to be positive that you are already accepted. Now you have to promote some kind of edifice where you can promote and convince people like other kinds of faith, other religion. They convince people. Like you can see those people in the street and they convince the people to attend their church. Something like that. Create a church for you. You are now in this contemporary time able to do, have created already that group, that organization. Don't waste time, you just establish it. You know?
Yeah, thank you for that. I really see where you're coming from. I see your points, the idea of how do we amplify our message beyond what is just this room, was just this space. And I would wonder if that kind of money would be so nice in my bank account, but abolish money, one day. But I think for me, it would be much more important to put those resources towards generating spaces for community, generating spaces for love. I mean, looking at the Asian American community and looking at how, for example, we are dealing with a massive crackdown on immigration. During the Trump era in New York City, Asian Americans were the most deported, or folks of Asian descent were the most deported. Chinese people were the most deported, followed by the Indian community. I think focusing on other needs and requirements and then seeing a queer person doing that work, I think is very helpful. I'm leaning on examples like a lot of the Black trans leadership who are thinking not just about what does the Black trans community need, but what does everybody need. So, you know, folks like Trans Liberation Kitchen, the need is our community needs food. So why not show a Black trans leadership providing food for the community? I think that's something we can tap into that way.
Any other questions? Oh, Steph.
Hi. So I have a question about pronouns and gendered terms, especially as somebody who lives with folks who speak different languages, right? How do y'all navigate that?
When I speak Mandarin, it's genderless, so that addresses that. In terms of Ta is like gender neutral. To begin with, you can't actually phonetically sound out what the genders are. But if you want to talk about gender, the way that I would navigate that is that, you know, if they're family members, especially people who are in your close quarters, they observe a lot. So they pick up on cues. If they don't seem receptive, that's probably not a good sign, you know, that it's necessarily safe. And so that's some information to carry in terms of that. that's my current thought right now. Since the Q&A section is probably the hardest for panelists.
I think it's really interesting how pronouns have become this site of contestation, because on a certain level, really, we should just respect whichever pronoun or set of pronouns someone uses to self-identify. But I think it's become so hotly contested because transgender now is the hot spot. And I think actually it relates to marriage, because my analysis is that once the religious right lost the same-sex marriage war, where else do they have to go, right? And so trans people are the new boogie persons. So this weird fixation on pronouns, which on a certain level, to my mind, is just a practical question of what pronouns you use, what would you like me to use with you, what would you use with me, has become so fraught simply because it's gotten caught up in this whole culture war thing about transgender. But the one thing I'd say to that is that I've done hundreds of transgender sensitivity training sessions. And when people come into those sessions, they think they're going to hear about medical interventions like hormones and surgery for a teeny tiny percentage of the population. And what I do is I try to show that transgender actually, that we should all be invested in transgender rights and liberation. Because it goes to the heart of the sex-gender binary, which I think is the root of our oppression as women, men, boys, girls, non-binary people, trans people, etc. And so when we talk about pronouns, I think we have to do so in a way that broadens the question to this larger question. And so as I see it, the work that I do as a transgender rights activist is not simply to get juridical rights for a small percentage of the population, but to challenge and ultimately dismantle the sex-gender binary, and to connect it with people. And so at the end of every transgender sensitivity training session that I've ever done, at least one or two people come up to me and say, "You just blew my mind." And I say, "Yeah, that's my job." That's what I get paid for. But what is really important is that they then see, oh, this has to do with me. And so, for example, women have come up to me and said, "Wow, I didn't realize that transgender really had to do with, the status of women, etc." But also men, because even though men are have a degree of male privilege, obviously, but they are also, in a certain sense, oppressed by this whole system. We all are. And so I think ultimately we need to expand the question of pronouns beyond just respecting each other's pronouns, which we all should do, to this larger question of the pursuit of social justice and social change.
Are there any other questions?
Can I address something? Like Rohan also reminded me how much my mind was blown when the Gender Liberation March is led by a black trans woman talking about abortion rights. I feel like one of the things that might blow people's minds because they think that the LGBTQ community there's this assumption that means that they don't reproduce, and so that doesn't matter to them, and a demonstration that really is very important to all of us is demonstrated by the fierce leadership of the pulpit of those people who do that.
All right, if there are no more questions, I got to thank the panelists, Steph, Hila-san, and the library for putting on this event. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Susan.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Allison.
Recording stopped.
Just do that. Oh, do that.
Does everyone want to hear the story of me and
Oh
Karen?
God, no, do not tell,
Oh,
stop, 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 stop.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine, fine,
No,
never
no,
mind.
stop, stop. This is too embarrassing.
All right, never mind.